Appreciate the opportunity to come and present the FY2023 CIP to Council today. We've got a pretty brief agenda. We'll move through this quickly in the interest of time. We'll start off with our funding summary. I always like to start there just to break down the CIP a little bit more. You'll note, as in years past, our biggest section here is our congestion relief and capacity improvements. That's just a little less than 50%, 45% there with $94.5 million. And you can see the other three remaining categories: safety improvements, special projects, and maintenance projects. So our total city funding for years 1 through 6 adds up to $209.1 million, and that encompasses 57 total projects and programs. So if we take that funding and we roll that in with our state and federal contributions there, you'll note we have a total of about $108 million between those two categories, state and federal. That makes up about 34% of our total funding, with the city funding coming in at 66%. So our total for years 1 through 6 ends up being $317 million, and our total cost, if we had all the money in the world that we needed, would be $1.3 billion to fund every project in the roadway program. So we have a large program. So let's talk about projects with no changes. We'll go through these quickly, but just to kind of highlight, there's 28 projects total in here, and you'll note as we go through, there's about half, a little less than half, 15 of the 28 has some form of state and federal funding on those. So that's funding outside of the program. So that's a good thing for us, and we just like to note that as we go through those projects. And also the next slide shows programs with no change, and of these 11 programs, 4 of those have state and federal funding. In particular, number 8 is our traffic safety improvement program that covers a lot of our federal grant programs, smaller grant projects where we have matching grants are covered in that program. So we'll talk about new programs. We have actually 2 new projects and 1 new program introduced this year in the CIP. The first one we'll move to is Atlantic Avenue pedestrian improvements. This is from 42nd to 83rd Street, not to be confused with the Atlantic Avenue refresh project from 9th Street to 25th Street. This one is basically going to provide pedestrian and bicyclist improvements with ADA ramps, crosswalks, LED warning signs, mid-block flashing beacons, so a lot of good ped improvements. This has been coordinated with the Resort Area Mobility Plan, and the total cost on this is $1.2 million. Next project for consideration is the relocation of the 19th Street and Pacific Avenue signal. This is simply a relocation of the existing signal at 19th Street to 20th Street. Again, with the development in that area, 19th Street eventually being closed, that signal needs to be moved, and this is the time to do it. Total cost on that is $1.2 million. The last new program that we're asking for this year is the Construction Engineering Inspection Program. This is new. This is a program that really is based on our inspection needs for construction projects. And typically on a city-funded project, we can get away with phased inspections where our inspector's there for a concrete pour or setting steel. They don't have to be there for every single event that's going on just because we don't have the resources to do that. For state and federally funded projects, they have to be there. There's civil rights paperwork that has to be tracked. There's material paperwork. There's all kinds of things that have to be tracked. So with this, what we found in the past is we've kind of littered CEI in a lot of projects in our program, and we were looking at our costs this year in a way to try to reduce those. We realized that if we could take these costs and we could kind of put them into one program, we could pare that down a little bit and be able to respond to the resource needs instead of having CEI put in kind of as a contingency on so many projects. So even though it's a big number there, $3.5 million, that ultimately is going to save us money overall in the program each year. So instead of having 6 or 7 million scattered throughout the program, we'll have 3.5 in one program, and that ultimately will save us money. So our next slide, we want to talk about projects with changes. As much as I would have liked to put 14 more PowerPoint slides in here, I just couldn't do it. We wanted to summarize all of our changes for you kind of in one slide here. So these are just projects with some major cost or schedule changes. Realistically, there's other projects. This year was a very difficult year for the CIP. We had most everything cost went up, as you're probably going to hear today. We had very few projects where costs went down. Our programming group, engineering support, led by Katie Shannon, did a great job trying to rein these costs in and get everything programmed. But you'll note here, there's a lot of significant increases, and that's material. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. But a lot of these you can see 11, 15%, not uncommon. Some of the smaller projects you'll note have some fairly significant increases. Some of that have been some scope changes. A lot of that has been related to stormwater improvements. I'm telling people there's no such thing as a simple sidewalk project anymore. It's a sidewalk project with a stormwater component to it, and that's driving a lot of the costs up as we get into these projects. So those are things that we're just having to wrestle with and work through on the design side. Again, material cost increases. If we have a lot of pipe on a project, like Shore Drive, one down there at the bottom, large pipe, that's driving a lot of cost increases, a lot of stormwater quality structures. Those have been, costs have been going up significantly on that. So I wanted to put in just some information on some of the drivers. This is maybe anecdotal, but it kind of helps paint the picture of what we're dealing with. And just showing you some of the major cost drivers that we've seen over the course of from December 20 to December 21. This probably comes as no surprise. You've seen it, but it kind of puts some numbers to this as far as steel. That's one of the big cost drivers. I think Tom mentioned on his for the escalators. It's fallen in that same category. Certainly fuel costs have gone up. Diesel fuel is no exception. Any metals, aluminum, copper, brass, truck transport, even construction equipment itself is going up. One of the indices that we've looked at is this producer price index. This is provided from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and essentially that's the cost that the producer of the material charges to the vendor. So if I'm a supplier, my steel cost going to a contractor, that's what I'm charging them. So they monitor that. In that same time period, they're showing almost a 20% increase. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to us that we're seeing some of these larger increases on our projects. As far as schedules go, we do have some schedule drivers as well. We've taken a look at most of our projects and tried to re-baseline them, not based on what we think or we hope is going to happen, but historically what we've seen. And so that's caused a lot of the schedules to slide to the right. But the reality is it's taken longer for review submittals, it's taken longer for permitting, it's taking longer for procurement. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, and we could talk about those all day, but the reality is that's where they are right now. So we're trying to make sure our schedules reflect reality so we can ensure we deliver projects on time. There's also the continued material availability that also affects schedules, and certainly the volatility of the supply chain that is ongoing. So just to talk about a few accomplishments, I'm going to skip through that slide. You can look at that later. One project our operations group completed recently was the rehabilitation of the Punga Ferry Bridge. That was an important project with the deck overlay, bearing replacements, and expansion joint replacements. That project was completed again in March for a total cost of $3.9 million. And also the Nemo Parkway Phase 2A. This is the roundabout hanging into the Vet Care Center. This was also completed in March with a total cost of $3 million. And then finally, when we talk about some challenges, certainly I wanted to highlight resources being a challenge, and there's a lot of different things when you say resources, but one of the things I want to impress upon council right now is that there's a lot of big projects going on in the area. When we talk about the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, that's a $3.8 billion project. We talk about the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, that's an $800 million project. So between those two projects alone, you have almost $5 billion worth of work going on. That's a lot of bandwidth that's getting sucked up when it comes to engineers and project managers and contractors and SWAM subs and just responsiveness in general. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we talk about costs and schedules and things like that. And in addition to that, when we talk about cost increases, we're running into scenarios with contractors where we talk about being able to just hold prices. When you talk steel, that's one of those things where you submit a price at bid time, and in some cases, the contractor may not get the actual price until the material is delivered. That could be 6 or 8 months down the road. So if you're a contractor, you've got to figure out how you price that risk into your bid. So we're trying to find ways to help with that. We don't want to give the farm away from the city's perspective, but our goal is not to have a contractor go bankrupt financing our work. So we're trying to be fair about that and working with the city attorney's office to find some ways we can do that contractually. And then finally, we want our schedules to reflect reality, as I mentioned earlier. So when we have trouble getting material, we may find that although construction is scheduled to start, we may have to delay the actual work because we can't get pipe until, say, 4 months down the road. We're finding that with reinforced concrete pipe, it may not get here for 4 months. So there's no sense in opening up a road or shutting it down until we know we've got some of these critical materials on site. That's not going to be good for anybody. So we're trying to be smart about that. And then finally, we just want to make sure we're managing expectations and communicating changes to our leadership and the council as well. So, and with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions, Michael?
Thank you.
have a question that's related to a project in my district, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring it up, and that's the Lynn Haven Parkway corridor improvement. Is that part of this CIP discussion?
Is that the Lynn Haven, the sense of arrival project that we
Yes.
talked about?
It's not a roadways project, but it's a streetscape
I believe
improvement
that's an economic
sidewalk
development.
project.
Is that right?
It's an economic
Yeah,
development.
it's an
Okay.
economic development, yes,
Thank
sir. We're managing that, so, I mean, I don't know if there's something we
Well,
can,
then I think it is appropriate to bring
Sure,
up. And
sure.
I've shared this, my thoughts on this with various members of city staff, and I want to state them publicly here today. There have been many reasons for the delay of this project, and for the public who are watching, the Lynn Haven Parkway Improvement Project is one that was, dates back to, I think, 2016 or 2017. Those of you who are on council before me will be able to attest to it. It's not one that I was part of initiating, but it's incredibly important to the Lynn Haven Business District corridor. Provides that sense of arrival, as you noted, provides really outstanding streetscape improvements that improve mobility. It improves the appearance of the area. It helps to promote a sense of identity and sense of place for Lynn Haven, which, as I noted at a previous meeting, is in many ways, an underappreciated asset within our city. Continues to perform through recessions, in good times and bad times. Lynn Haven district and the people who work and own businesses there continue to deliver for our city and provide jobs and a reliable stream of revenue for our city. And so it's really incumbent upon us to be considerate and respectful of their place in our city, and for a variety of reasons, including, of course, the May 31st tragedy, which I know we're all very sensitive about, and understanding of this project has been delayed and delayed and delayed, and it's time to get the project started. I think what's delaying it is a number of easements. I think we need to accelerate our efforts to obtain those easements and move this project forward and get it done. The person who preceded me on council really asked me to help shepherd this project through. We were not able to break ground during her term, and I would like to see progress made this before I complete my first term. And so my respectful request to the manager and to staff is to let's get this thing going and let's get this done for Lynn Haven District. Thank you.
understood.
Okay, Rosemary.
When do we think Laskin Road is going to be finished?
Laskin Road, the VDOT project, I believe was scheduled to be completed next spring, if I'm not mistaken. But let me check with them to get an update, because I know they've had some delays and they don't always get reported until later in the project. So let me follow up on that.
Okay. Linwood.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm going to talk about Laskin Road real quick, and just would like you to double check something, David, if you would. But if you're coming east on Laskin Road,
Mhm.
so on the left-hand side where that bike path is going to be, about 600 yards shy of Birdneck Point neighborhood, that bike path was left out of the original project.
Correct.
Do you know if that's in now, and we're going to complete that bike path to Birdneck Point?
What I know is we've talked with VDOT about that. We've raised the issue. They have. We've actually given them some survey data on that to help them put together an estimate for that. My understanding is they've estimated that. They've talked internally and said that they are going to fund that. It's going to happen. However, they're waiting to go to the CTB one more time. I think they get one more lick on the lollipop to get some more funding, and that's what they're going to do, is include that request in with their overall request for some additional funding for that.
If that isn't going to be coordinated with the completion of that road project, could you bring that to our attention and the city manager's attention? Because if not, we're going to force bicycles into traffic for about 600 yards into oncoming traffic, and
Agreed.
that cannot be acceptable.
Yeah, we had a long conversation with VDOT. They always get on us about logical termini, and we just thought logical termini in a driveway doesn't make too much sense there. So I think they understood
I
that.
appreciate you
Yes, sir.
paying close attention to that one. And my second question is, I get questions from time to time about our milling and repaving schedule for roads.
Mhm.
Is that done on a time schedule or a inspection schedule, or how do we do that?
I'm gonna let Philip Cutter or LJ answer that. I don't want to misspeak.
Councilman, that's actually done through our operations department as opposed to the engineering department. Periodically, about every 5 years, we do an evaluation of all of the roads inside of our roadway network. And that evaluation gives us a score for each roadway segment. And a roadway segment might not be the entirety of Virginia Beach Boulevard, but it might be a segment of Virginia Beach Boulevard. That score is evaluated, compared against each other, and that helps us put together our schedule for how we're doing repaving. So it's not a, we try very much to make it a metric-driven decision. However, saying that a lower score on a Virginia Beach Boulevard a higher score on Virginia Beach Boulevard might rank ahead of a lower score on a Viking Drive, for instance, because of just the number of vehicles that travel it every day. But it does go into that determination. The score is what drives
It's
it,
an
as opposed to.
inspection-based
Yes, sir.
process.
And
Okay.
it's done every 5 years, which we're getting ready to kick off our next one, I think within the next 6 months or so.
Thank you, LT.
Hey, anyone else? Barbara?
It's really nice to see that your two completed roadway projects are both in the Princess Anne District.
It just worked out that way.
The rehabilitation of Punga Ferry Bridge, of course, that's different from the bond referendum to raise the road.
Correct.
But this project had the potential of causing a lot of confusion, but it went very smoothly. And good planning, and really appreciate all the work that went into getting that done.
And that was our Public Works Operations group with Philip Cutter's out there.
Great job, a great scheduling, those weekends to be closed, and it all had to be worked out with the fire departments and everybody, and y'all did a great job. I never had any complaints. And it's good to see this little roundabout finished. Now we just have to get used to how to use it and so forth, but thank you for that. But what's missing here is the Princess Anne 7 project that is going to get completed.
It is going to get completed, yes, ma'am. We've met with the contractor, and again, still kind of waiting on some information from Virginia Natural Gas. But the majority of the job, we believe, will be substantially completed here in early May. That's our goal right now. Definitely get out of there before tourist season gets ramped
I
up.
was going to say, especially that Sandbridge intersection
ma'am.
before we get into the Memorial Day stuff. So it's still that
Yes, ma'am.
other one, but thank you, it's going to happen eventually. On these major cost schedule changes, I know Elbow Road B and C, that was going to start this year for B, but it's rescheduled to start next year because you're going to put both of them together.
Correct.
And that's why they're on this list. So that, for Elbow Road, will be next year beginning. But what is this one on the projects with no change? What's Phase 2D for Elbow Road?
That's the other piece. That's the sister 2 lanes. The one we're doing right now, B and C, go up to Margaret Drive, Salem essentially. So from Salem heading back towards the amphitheater would be the other 2 lanes. That would be the other portion, Phase D, where, where the amphitheater, where it necks down the 2 lanes, it would widen that out. So Elbow Road would be 4 lanes all the way from Princess Anne to Indian River Road.
That is just another full
phase.
and
That's right.
Okay, I was thinking it was going to go everything, but there is a D.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then Indian River Road, that's slid back another year, and that both of those phases are going to be done together, and therefore they will begin in '24.
Correct.
Didn't these 2 roads also experience some kind of glitch with state funding, but all that's been worked out? Is that correct?
It has been worked out when we had with the revenue share funding. I don't think Indian River, I think Elbow was impacted by that, but we've worked that out with VDOT, yes.
Okay, so with both of these projects, the funding is worked out and everything. It's just the rescheduling because of putting those projects together.
Correct. Everything's resolved now.
Very good.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else at this point?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Aaron.
I just want to say thank you, Dave. I know Dustin in your office, who's in charge of the Rosemont Road widening project, I had a lot of concerns and questions from the constituents in Rosemont Road, which is District 10, my district. And Dustin got back to their inquiries and questions very, very quickly. And I just want to say thank you
Great.
for that. I know that's scheduled, the CIP for 2025, I believe it is.
I think so, yes. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll pass that along to staff. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very
All right,
much.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Dehaney, I gotta tell you this, it seems between the stormwater and flood protection, buildings and roads, we got a lot of moving parts going on all over the city in terms of improving infrastructure. Kudos to you and your group.
Thank you, sir.